Welcome back to another month of gem cutting conversations. Wow, I almost missed my own title here. I'm Justin K. Prim, and thank you guys once again for joining. I'm excited as usual about today's guest. This is the first time, I think, this year at least, that we've talked to somebody in Australia, and I'm kind of going back through, I guess, through a lineage here. If you were here with us last year, before this Gem Cutting Conversations series started, I was doing the first COVID wave of webinars, and we did one with my good friend in Australia, Laura Phyllis, otherwise known as Tatum Gems, if you're following her on Instagram or on the web or whatever. So today we're going to be talking to Scott Langford. Scott was Laura's mentor, teacher, whatever. And so I had always known about Scott, but we hadn't really met. You know, we talked a little bit online, but we haven't met, and we haven't had any sort of long conversations before. So I'm really excited for this webinar because this is kind of our introduction together. So I'm curious to see a little bit of Scott's story. He just told me that he's been cutting for now 30 years professionally in Australia. So I'm sure that there's some good stories in store for us this evening, or maybe this morning if you're just waking up. Either way, thanks for being here. Okay, Scott, if you are ready. Not seeing me. What about now? Someone said they couldn't see
How's
me.
that?
Can you see me?
I can see you.
I can see you. Okay. Hopefully everyone else
All
can
right.
see us as well. Maybe I was way up in somebody's top corner and they didn't even know. So welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Um, good to be here. Good to just talk about gems and gem cutting and whatever.
Whatever. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. So well, first of all, where are you at in the world right now? Where are you coming from?
I'm coming from Southern Australia, uh, from the Adelaide Hills in a little town called Harndorf. It's a German tourist town, but it's a lovely little place. And I've lived here for about 18 years, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a
Cool.
great little place. Yeah.
I've never been to Australia. It's been on it's been on my list for a couple of years, and
Mm.
I was gonna come. I think it was last year, and then COVID just totally destroyed that plan. But
Mm.
since I made that plan, I have so many things in Australia that I want to do, and meetings with people, and machines to pick up. And now my Australia list has gotten so big, and even into like New Zealand. Now someone was like, "Come to New Zealand. I have this machine for you." And I was,
Yeah.
and then a friend in Tasmania, and I was like, "Man, I have to go down there." But yeah, it's not really going to happen this year, at least. So at least we can do virtual hangouts like
Well,
that.
that's right. Or there's, yeah, like you said, there's always the post, isn't there, for little things. But if you're talking machines, you probably want to come over and have a look at them too, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. Australia has so many cool faceting machines that I think most people don't know about because
Mm.
I mean, if you're in America or Europe, you don't really hear about them because they're so far away. Nobody's really
Yeah.
thinking about like, oh, I'm going to get a machine from Australia and bring it all the way to the other side of the
True.
earth.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which is a bit
Well, I
silly,
was.
really, because people in Australia maybe buy them from America, or people from Europe buy them from America. So why not Australia?
Well, I know a few people that have bought American machines, but I think there's some good manufacturers over here. You know, because of the Sapphire fields. I'm assuming that a lot of the faceting machines were made for faceting Australian Sapphire,
Yeah.
maybe Australian Emerald, perhaps. And you know, I'm guessing that's where a lot of those companies were perhaps born and
Yeah.
and into, yeah,
I've
bigger
always
and better things.
heard, yeah, I've always heard such good things about Australian machines. Like almost, I'm trying to think if there's any Australian machine I haven't heard that like this is the best machine. Um, all of
Mm,
them, all of them that I've heard about seem to be like one of the best build quality machines, and
mm,
and maybe even like designed by gem cutters kind of thing, where it makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense. The way that it works usually
yeah,
makes some sense.
yeah.
Well, anyway, we'll get into some gear talk later. First of all, let's hear a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your story. As I was saying before, you're what I'm gonna. I don't know if you would put this. You would say it in these words, but you're part of a lineage in Australia. You're
Mm,
at least in the middle of one between Laura and
yeah,
your master teacher before you. So let's hear a little bit about
yeah.
how you got started and how you learned.
All right. Yeah, how I got started. Well, I mean, I've always had a fascination with gems and rocks, so that's a good start for everyone who wants to do this or is doing it, I'm sure. Um, but what I started doing was making jewelry, and at that particular college where they taught jewelry, they offered a course on gem cutting as well once a week as part of the jewelry making. So it was only cabochon cutting, but I think once I started working with gems, or let's call it, cutting cabochons, I think the variety of color and patterns and all that type of thing just in the rocks themselves was quite fascinating. So to be able to use those rocks and turn them into something that you could then put into jewelry, for me, was more fascinating than actually making jewelry itself. So then all of a sudden you're learning names of different rocks and gems and things like that, and where they came from, and you realize that once you start that learning process, that's such a huge, you know, uh, uh, list of gemstones you can work with. So in the end, I thought I really want to follow a path of gem cutting or gem identifying or something like that. And so I started doing my diploma in gemology as well. Um, and essentially, I suppose what I wanted to do was try and learn as much as I could about gems and gem cutting to hopefully find someone that was doing it for a living, and therefore, at least preparing myself with as much education as I could possibly do to take to that person and say, hey, this is what I really want to do. This is what I've learned so far. Can you take me further, basically? So as I got a little bit, better at the gem cutting and just really realized that's what I wanted to do, and then got onto my diploma in gemology. While I was there was in part of the gemology course, they did a section on gem cutting. And so my first boss, Murray Thompson, he came in and did a talk on gem cutting, being a professional gem cutter at the time. And I just kind of went, oh my God, wow, there is actually someone doing this for a living. I didn't have any idea there was people like that in Adelaide. And because Adelaide's such a small town, and so is the whole community of gem cutting in Australia. It's quite small compared to, say, Europe or America, or you know what I mean? So when you find someone like that, I suppose you just get really excited, and all of a sudden there's this tunnel vision of, right, I need to either chase that man down and find out where they work and do whatever I can to get my foot in the door of this industry, because I already decided this is what I want to do. How else am I going to do it? So once again, I just kept with a study and doing more gem work with, just theory and trying to find out whatever you could. And eventually I think I called Murray up and I said, I just kind of asked him if there was any chance of being able to do work experience with him, and just to kind of go and see what they do, on a daily basis as a gem cutter or as a gem business, and which was good. He was very happy, and he's always been a person to be generous with his education and his time, and it's been, and he still does. So for me, I went to his house, I did a week's work experience, learning, just showing me, we did some opal cutting, we did some faceting, and just kind of, went through the whole week of just seeing how the business runs, I suppose. But also for me, looking at all the different types of machines and the way you can use them, and different, materials, aquamarine, opal, garnet, all those things. And like, wow, this is just, it's a dream, really. So turning that dream into reality, I suppose, was the next step, which I think I used to call him maybe every couple of weeks to find out if there was any work, or could I come and, do another couple of days just hanging out, I suppose. And eventually what he did have was a job for me to come in. It was a fairly basic skills job, of course, but for me, it was that foot in the door where you can then, I suppose, transition, hopefully, to working there for longer periods and learning more about gem cutting itself. So I was sandblasting glass slides, and they use those glass slides on the back of opal triplets to make opal triplets. So that was my first job at a gem cutting business, was sandblasting these glass slides, and that paid for my wage each week. And as I got quicker at those, I was able to do 1 day of gem cutting and then 2 days of gem cutting. And eventually, as I got a little bit better at the gem cutting part of it, I was doing some of the gem cutting and also doing this sandblasting of these glass slides. And from there, I suppose, I guess it just kind of, just happened. And before I knew it, there was more work coming in for Murray, which meant he needed more help, and I was getting quicker and better at what I was doing. And in the end, we finished doing all those glass slides. I think it was 28,000 I did of them. And, it was good to see the end of them, but in a way, it was what got me in this industry, just I was happy to do anything. And he was quite happy to show me things along the way, of course, because perhaps he saw potential in me being a good gem cutter in the future, and just the knowledge perhaps I'd already acquired before I got there. It must have been a good help for him, knowing, all of those things, that for him to support me, I guess he knew it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that's where it all started. That would have been 1992. I started working for Murray, and I worked there for about 4 or 5 years, doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
So aside from doing sandblasting, and you were cabbing and faceting, and
Yeah.
you were making opal triplets as well, or doublets, or
we did that. Oh yeah, we did. We made opal triplets and doublets. We used to visit the opal fields and buy parcels of opal and process those.
Wow.
Opal specimens. I remember we had an opal specimen once. It was so big I had to sit down on a chair to polish it with like an air compressor type grinder with a sanding machine on it. It was probably the size of a coffee table. It was huge. So when I worked for Murray, I had the opportunity to work with so many amazing things, because he'd had a lot of experience previously and a lot of contacts. And so I suppose it's like, I'm trying to, just the opportunity he already created for his business, I suppose. And for me, coming in as a novice to seeing all these things, really did, you just don't know they exist until you're right there doing it yourself. So
Yeah.
Otherwise, for every sort of person off the street, you'd never see that. But anyone in the gem industry, you can believe that's what is happening. Does that make sense? I think it does. But
and what a unique, what a really Australian specific way to do it. Like, nobody else in the world would be making 50,000 glass pieces for doublets, because who else is making doublets and triplets in the world? I mean, some are, but not many.
No, and we did make a few, but a lot of those boxes went back to a wholesale supplier, who then shipped them up to the opal fields, and that's where they were making hundreds of them at a time. So it was kind of, we were doing that work was for someone else, who then paid Murray, who then paid me, kind of thing. It was like, I was just this person, just starting off, helping out my boss, and he was helping me back. And all of a sudden, 3 or 4 months down the track, I'm learning how to facet a stone. And it's kind of how it works in this industry in Australia. It's a little bitsy sometimes, but you see the potential in the people that either work for you, and you want to try and feed them as much as you can. But because it's either yourself and maybe another worker, it's you've got to manage those things from a financial point of view as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, essentially that's why you employ people, because you want them to get better, you want them to learn, and you also want them to support your business, I suppose. So, and I think that's what the good people see in employing someone, is that essentially they just want to learn and they want to be in the industry, and that's great if you can support that. So, and
True.
that's what he's done, and that's what I've done, and it's nice to keep that going.
So if you started in 1992, do you know how long
Mm.
was he cutting before that?
Well, okay, so he learnt to facet. I think it would have been maybe I'm going to say the very early 80s,
Okay.
at least. Um, I can't actually speak to him now. I'm sure I'll ring him tomorrow and find out. But he learnt to facet emeralds on the Western Australian emerald fields. That's where he learnt to facet. So, and they used to just use a index wheel with 8 notches on it. That's it, just for cutting emerald cuts.
Yeah. I guess you don't need more than that for an emerald.
No, that's it. Yeah, you wouldn't miss index too many, I'm sure.
And so, and how big was that shop that you were working in? Was it just two of you, or was there other workers there as well?
Well, so it's very similar to me. We work from where we live, but we had a workshop out the back of the house, and also down the front of the house, where front of the house was all the faceting and the cleaner type stuff. Up the back was a lot of the cabbing and a lot of the large slabbing we used to do.
Okay. Messy stuff.
But it was essentially myself and Murray and his wife Roz. She was part of the business too, and she used to teach introduction to gemology. So they were both involved in the gems and gemology. They loved it, you know. But yeah, it was really, in the end, it was just myself and Murray, perhaps the lapidarists, that were doing all the cutting. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
so cool.
definitely.
So cool.
Yeah.
What a good way to get into it. I mean, it sounds like it's a really a supportive environment with friendly
Mm,
people.
yeah.
I'm curious, being in Australia, which is such a kind of a unique place where, you actually have gem mines, and there's a reason why there's a gem trade there, because of the mines and stuff. Is it
Mm,
is
mm.
it sort of more normal for people to get into gemstones in Australia, or is it still sort of a weird alternative kind of path?
Yes. Yeah, I think it is still, because when people ask me what I do for a living, they they just go, "Oh wow, that'd be cool." I think they just don't realize that. I think a lot of people over here think jewelers do the gem cutting,
Uh,
and quite often, oh, where do I take this to get cut? Do I take it to a jeweler? Well, you can, but we obviously do the cutting for them. But no, the amount of people that don't even realize that perhaps what we do is a profession. And in Australia, it's even smaller, of course. There's, yeah, you're like a needle in a haystack. If someone asks you what you do and you say you're a gem cutter, oh, all right, really? Oh, wow. So you like cut gems and things? That's kind of what people,
yeah.
tend to know about cutting gems over here if they don't do it. So,
So the same as
yeah,
everywhere
it's
else.
still pretty. It's a very, very rare occupation to find over here. That's for sure. Especially maybe if you're up on the sapphire fields, you might bump into someone, or like if you're on the opal fields, you'd bump into an opal cutter. But you know, just the
Yeah.
good old city of Adelaide. Yeah, not really.
Yeah. So maybe you're right. If you live in a mining town, probably a lot of gem people in that one
Mm,
small place. But from what I've seen
yeah,
on the maps, the mining towns are pretty remote. Like they're not by
no, yeah,
anybody else.
no. No, I've only been to a few, because they are so far away. Because where Laura and I live, we're right down the bottom of Australia, and in the middle. So as far as a lot of the sapphire fields, they're right up this part of Australia. And on a map, it doesn't look far, but it's at least 2 days drive from
Yeah.
here, 2 full days drive just to get to one of those sapphire fields. So
I remember last year
um,
when I was like sort of planning this Australian trip, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be over on this East Coast side, and Laura lives over here, and like the mines are sort
mm,
of in the middle. I was like, oh, no problem, I'll just
mm.
drive. And then I just did Google Maps, and I was like, oh, no, not doing that. That's like a whole week of driving just
Oh, yeah, it
across.
is. I know.
It,
I know. I
I don't
mean,
know
I
why
think,
you look at the Australian, at least as an American, I look at the map of Australia on the globe, and I'm like, oh, it's not that big. And then you're like, oh wait, no, it's the same size as America. It's huge. I think it's the
mm,
same size as America, or almost, and
yeah, well, that's
it's
right,
really
isn't it? Yeah,
big.
it is. Because I had a friend come over from Washington, and she's a gemologist and loves stones, and she wanted to go to Coober Pedy and Lightning Ridge and the Sapphire Fields, and they were only in Adelaide for 2 weeks, and we just kind of said, "You're just going to have to pick one because we
Yeah,
just cannot do there, and there. It's not, yeah, you don't, yeah." So
and even
anyway,
yeah, even if you wanted to do it faster, I was thinking like, could I fly? And then I was like, oh no, there's no airports like or in those places, and flying is kind of expensive in Australia anyway. It's not like a $50
yeah,
flight. It's like a couple $100 to get
it
around.
is, especially to those remote places as well. Then they might only do one flight a day as well. I don't know, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, accessibility is a thing for sure. I mean, even from here to Coober Pedy, it's about 850 kilometers. So that's about what, 500 miles, I think,
yeah. So you're not gonna want
roughly.
to. You're gonna need some time for that.
Yeah, you do. You need a whole day planning just to get there. And which we used to. When we used to go to Cooper, we'd leave at maybe 5 o'clock in the morning and aim to be there, just early afternoon, and then we'd hit some of the miners straight away and see what they've got, because
Yeah,
you can't waste any time. It takes you all day to get there, and you're there on business. So
yeah.
that's kind of what we did. Yeah.
I guess it's sort of similar here. Like we've got the same situation in Bangkok where, we have this mining city here called Chantaburi, which is where all the
Mm,
ruby mines used to be. And there, there's still some mining and there's a lot of trading going on there. But if you want to go
mm.
there, the only way to go is to drive. There's no train or plane.
Right.
And it's like 6 hours in the car. So you get up early, you
Oh,
drive, you get there right after lunch, and then you're tired, but you're like, okay, I still got 4 more hours where I can do work
yeah.
before the sun goes down. Um, and
And
then,
that's a trading place. What, it just goes like they trade 7 days a week kind of thing.
no,
You could,
it's more like the weekends. I mean, obviously it's a city, it's there every day, but like the actual gem trading stuff is mostly like Friday, Saturday, maybe Thursday, Friday. I can't remember if it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it's kind of like the weekend. So
mm,
usually people go down on Friday morning, stay till Sunday
right.
night, and then
Yeah.
that's a
Okay.
business trip, for the weekend.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And
yeah,
just seek and find whatever you can. And
yeah.
yeah.
And so yeah, same for
Mm,
you guys. Go up, get opals or sapphires, or I guess emeralds if you're in
mm.
that place. Did you guys cut much emeralds when you were, doing your
Oh,
initial few years?
it's a very small scale operation over here, the emerald mining itself. And a lot of it's not a great quality. You really had to sift through whatever was clean material. I mean, it's emerald, obviously, it's never going to be clean, but you didn't want to pick out material that you're cutting and it kept breaking halfway through. I
Yeah,
mean, emerald's not great to cut, unless it's clean, and where's clean emerald material anyway? So, um, but we did a little bit. Yeah, we used to be in contact with one miner. He'd bring us a small parcel, and we'd cut a few stones. Yeah, it's interesting material. It's not. Uh, it was, yeah. Where do they find it? They find it in mica schist. So quite often you get a lot of mica through it, or yeah, but it was never big material. A lot of small stuff,
yeah.
and obviously you cut it as clean as you can, so it's usable in jewelry. But mm,
We've had a few pieces come through our studio. I've cut a few from Torrington.
oh yeah,
We got one right now, and I was like, "Is that really an emerald?" I mean, some of it's so light, you're like, "I'm not sure if you can call
mm,
this one an emerald," but some of it's cool. It's
mm,
the ones I've done have been really banded, white and green,
yeah,
uh, unique. But Yeah, I thought it was pretty clean actually, the ones that I had, but not very saturated. So
The Torrington stuff is relatively clean. This stuff comes from Menzies in Western Australia. Now that it was proper looking emerald, as in saturated green, no
okay.
banding in it essentially, but just the clarity of it was hit and miss.
Hmm.
And they still find it up higher in WA as well, in the Pilbara region. So, but yeah, there's not a lot of it, that's for sure. And I think a lot of it is low quality, low to medium quality, and it's not even great cabbing material because it is so included. So it's kind of just specimen. And I get occasionally people send me pictures, or they say, oh, I found some emeralds, blah blah blah. They're really good quality, and then they send me a picture, and I go, well, that's not good quality. I'm not sure who told you it was, but
Opaque.
I can't cut that. I'm sorry, and I don't want to, because I'll spend all day cutting and I will just get nothing out of it. So there's always those dilemmas, unfortunately. But and which is I think that's probably a problem internationally. People that, well, it is perhaps fossicas or hobbyist miners, I would call them, aren't often educated in what good quality material is. And so while they might invest a bit of money into a mining lease and dig a few things up, the amount of material I've seen that they've thought is good quality is quite often poor quality, unfortunately. And it would be nice if one day, someone said it's good quality and it was good quality. It's very rare, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it happens all the time. It's just one of those things you have to deal with. And over the years, I've just got people to send me pictures first, because I used to get people to come to see me, and then you'd spend a lot of time with people explaining to them face to face that it's not great and why it's not great and what you should be looking for that is good material. So, but you generally never see them again after that. I think they learn what is good, and maybe they never find it. So
You destroyed their
yeah,
dream, basically.
well, but
Or
it's
maybe you
helping
made them
everyone in the
hungrier.
end.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, maybe that's right. At least they
maybe
know what they're looking
now
for.
they're
I'm
digging
trying to help
harder.
them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and that still happens. But hey,
So what do you
can
think?
only
I know, like, for instance, Montana sapphires in America, there's a bit of a demand for the local stone, right? Like there's a market for Montana sapphires in America because they're local. Is Australia
yeah.
the same? Like, do people in Australia really want, if they're going to buy stones, would they really prefer an Australian? I'm not going to say opal because obviously there's not that many alternatives, but like for an emerald or a sapphire, would you think the customers there would prefer an Australian version if versus somewhere else, or do they not care?
I think of late, and when I say of late, maybe at least the past 3 to 4 years, the level of Australian sapphire has been in really high demand. I don't know why. I think it's because people are looking for that ethical type uh, stone that's been mined in Australia, cut in Australia, and made into a piece of jewelry in Australia as well. I think that's the way. There's a real trend of that happening in the past few years, and so the Australian sapphire, yeah, I'm sure it's. I've always liked Australian sapphire, and I've bought it for many years, but over the past 4 or 5 years, I reckon I've really had to keep looking and buying and buying and buying, because the demand is just, it's almost getting out of hand, like there's not enough miners supplying the rough anymore, and therefore, okay, the price has gone up so much, and the demand for the stone has gone up so much, but the supply has diminished. So
Okay.
it's a bit of a worry, because when you're trying to run a business supplying stones that people want and you can get them, it's great. But when there's a point where you go, okay, I've just gone through 300 carats of rough. The last parcel I bought was only 50 carats. How am I going to keep supplying the demand of these people that want more and more? And it's, I don't know, sometimes, but I've been lucky the past few months. it's just turned up. I've had people that mined it in the 80s and have called me and say, I've got like a 3,000 or 4,000 carat parcel for sale. I'm like, bring it over, please, because it's not going anywhere else. So I've been lucky with that. And that's maybe the 30 years of experience of constantly being here all the time, people knowing they can call and bring you something to, you know what I mean? I think that's where experience counts sometimes. But yeah, that's the latest thing. Yeah, I think the emeralds, that's I guess with emerald, it's not so much of an issue here, but Australian sapphire definitely. Yeah, that's one thing I can definitely support. That so many people wanting that, because it comes in, well, ultimately it's blue, green, and yellow. They're the three dominant colours of the Australian sapphire, but it does come in other rarer colours as well, and then obviously a mixture of those colours as well. So that's what people want.
I wonder if that's been something too. I know in the last couple of years, the party color sapphires have been really sort of trending. So maybe people are looking, because there's not every locality can do that. And I think Australian ones are pretty interesting in the way that they, when you get that perfect piece of rough that can do multiple colors, it's cool.
It is. Yeah. Well, and different. You're right. Even the different localities of Australian sapphire produce different types of colours as well, or different intensities of colours. That place might have slightly more yellows to it. That one has a lot more greens coming from it. Your New England district, which is your Inverell and your Glen Innes type stuff, their blues are a different sort of blue from the Rubyvale blues. That sort of material tends to have a little more green in it, whereas the Glen Innes and the Inverell material tends to be more like a double blue with your very light blue cross table and your nicer, richer royal blue C-axis. So, but that material is really hard to find. There's just less miners doing it and less miners selling it as well. But also I've noticed a lot of the people that are doing small scale mining are also learning to facet themselves. So they're trying to do from, mine to market type situation as well, and value adding their hard work from the ground to the product itself. So, which is good. It's great to see people doing that.
So historically then, as someone who can source rough from your own country, what's the process of doing that? I mean, do you actually need to go to the mine sometimes, or you can meet the miners somewhere else, like a trade show, or they come to you, like what you were saying, or what's the normal way to do it? Or is there a normal way to do it?
Well, I don't know if there is a normal way to do it. I've never really had to go. Well, for me, or anyone living in Adelaide, what we were saying before, it's such a distance to go up to those mining fields. You really have to make some good contacts, I think, before you go there. Or so for me, perhaps over the years, I've met people that have cut and mined sapphire themselves at various gem shows, made good contacts with them, and stayed in contact with these people. And perhaps of late, some of them have retired from doing shows. They have a lot of cut material left and also a lot of rough material left, and they're looking to sell it or move it, because for them, they no longer need it. And for me, who's still, running a business and looking for that material. So I guess you call those people and find out if they're looking to sell material, or they'll quite often call you and say, Scott, I've finished doing shows. Are you interested in any of this material? Can I send you down some parcels? It's like, yeah, always. I'll buy whatever you send down. Nothing will come back. You gotta look after each other, I suppose, if you know what I mean. That's kind of, you've got to, that's what I've always tried to do, is make sure I've looked after people and been honest with people in the past, and that perhaps comes back to reward you later on from a business point of view and a friendship point of view with these people, that we can both trust each other with things. So and that's been lucky with a lot of parcels, obviously, that they look after you, they send down hand-picked material. And one particular person I'd been getting material off was also a gem cutter as well. He faceted his own material, So when you buy a parcel from people like that, you know when it comes down that it's going to be nicely hand-picked material. And he says, Scott, you can do this with this stuff, or this is really thin. You can maybe do some tablet type cuts with this, and he'll send a parcel down of that. And so that's been working really well for the past few years. Yeah. Cool. And same as the last parcel I bought was from a guy I'd never met before. And he's a farmer from down this area, but he used to go up to the Sapphire fields 3 months of the year and dig. And he also learned to facet, and he did competition cutting. And so once again, all the parcels I bought off him were really graded well. Once again, just lucky you meet these people, you know. And so for me, that's how I've managed to get sapphire rough in particular from these people. They're old miners. They've collected, they've dug, they've cut, and they've got it all just sitting there in the end and going, well, I'm kind of done with all this. Who else can I move on to? And you get the phone call and it's like, yeah. And then like, yes, great. It's
a good day.
They just turn up. I don't know how else it happens sometimes, but they just turn up when you need them. So I think.
So then as far as other cutters, you know, because I know Australia has an interesting cutting situation, kind of like America, where there's this world of hobby cutters and lapidary clubs, which I think is how, if I'm not, I don't know the whole story of Australia, but I think everyone in Australia must have learned that way, kind of like most people in America learned, at some point learned that way. So what's the community like in terms of, you as a professional cutter? Are there other professional cutters, or is it really rare to actually make a business out of gem cutting, do you think?
I know people that just do faceting for a profession. What Murray did and what I did was we also did faceting, opal cutting, inlay work, slabbing material, all sorts of stuff. So I think if you want to just do individual type learning, you can go to a gem club and learn a lot of that stuff. It is very slow learning because it's they can only do so many people at once teaching, if you know what I mean. There's only so many machines. I think recently I'm mentoring someone. He takes his own machine to the club, which is good because you get to work with your own machine, I suppose, which is very handy rather than changing machines. But speaking of Adelaide, it's fairly small. There's a few gem clubs that do a little bit of gem cutting. There's more clubs on the eastern states because I suppose there's more people, there's more clubs. There's also more opportunity over there to go fossicking and find things that are worth cutting as well. Okay. Where we are in South Australia, it's very limited to what you can find from a fossicking point of view and then take it home and cut it.
Yeah.
Whereas, let's say, Queensland, Victoria, and New South Wales, there's some great fossicking areas over there. And, you can find some great faceting material without having to go far from the city. So I suppose in that part of Australia, but it's still the same situation. You go fossicking, you find something, you take it back to your club. There's someone there who has a higher level of learning in the faceting area, teaching the guys at the club how to cut, and it still goes on, but it's not a huge scale operation over here at all. It's really it's still hobbyist level, I guess. Yeah. It's finding that transition from being a hobbyist to being a professional, I think, would be the hardest thing to do. If someone loves doing it for a hobby and they go, oh, how do I turn this into a business? I suppose that's when, I suppose social media is a big option these days. You can actually cut your own things and have your own, Instagram page or Facebook and promote yourself that way. But ultimately, running a business with gem cutting, you really probably want to maybe learn from someone who's doing that, or at least talk to them or get information from them, perhaps, if they're willing to give it, of course, because That's always been a thing. When I first started, a lot of gem cutters were very secretive about the way they cut their stones and what their polish was and all that sort of thing. But I think these days people are much more willing to share their information just to make that gem cutter over there be a little bit better than purely just for quality control, I suppose, more than anything, I hope. That's what I'd be giving information for, just to make them a better gem cutter.
Yeah.
Not to be worried about them cutting into my business, because it's not what it's about, really.
Yeah. Well, so speaking on that topic a little bit, talking about learning to run a business from somebody else who's already doing it, what are some of the things that you think, obviously that's how you learned, right? You learned from somebody who already had a business that was working, and
Yeah, yeah.
and and now you're doing the same thing. So what are some of the things do you think people need to know? Like for instance, are you working with a lot of jewelers, or
Yes, yeah.
yeah? So
Yeah, and that's, I mean, a lot of our stones go to jewelers and end up in finished jewelry itself. So as a finished product, that's what you hope for when you spend a lot of time buying rough, cutting it, and then realize all of a sudden you've got a tray of 50 stones or 30 stones. You realize, well, do I just keep cutting and cutting and cutting and just keep adding them to trays, or do I actually want to reward myself for my hard work and see someone appreciate what I've finished in front of me and put it into jewelry? And that's kind of exciting from a gem cutter point of view, that you can buy a piece of rough, cut it into a finished stone, and then all of a sudden a jeweler loves that stone. Then they have a customer that loves the stone, and before you know it, someone's wearing something you've helped to create yourself. I think that's kind of the drive you need to find, I think, if you want to do it for a profession. And
right.
if you like that sort of thing, well, I suppose that's the basis of it, really. It's that enjoyment of cutting, finishing, and perhaps that financial reward as well is rewarding. It means you can go out and buy more rough or more machines or whatever you want,
Yeah. I know for me, I never saw any of my stones in jewelry for the first couple years. And the first time when I moved to Bangkok, then suddenly I had this opportunity to like make, affordable stuff for myself. And I remember the first time that I got like 2 rings back from the jeweler that had my own stones in them. I was like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
I thought they were done, but they're not done until they're set. It's like a painting without the frame.
Yeah, true.
they're not finished yet. You need the whole thing, and
Yes,
then you see them, and you're like, oh, in context, they're so much better than just a loose
yes,
stone. So I
yes.
can totally see what you mean.
Mm,
You need to have that final step. Whether it means selling it and your customer having it, or just even for yourself, but.
yeah, yeah.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, in some of my travels when I meet cutters in different places, one really interesting place for me so far has been London, because that was the first time that I really got to see gem cutters who were deeply involved with the jewelry community, the jewelry manufacturing community, and seeing the type of work that they were doing,
Mm,
versus like what other people are doing. If you're just doing faceting, you don't really understand, like, that's only
mm,
maybe half or even a small part of the kind of work, right? Like
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
because you were saying inlays and cabochons and opals for
yeah,
you guys, like
yeah.
there's so much weird stuff that jewelers will throw at you that
Mm,
maybe many people don't realize, like inlay
mm,
and whatever else.
mm,
So
yeah,
what do you think, if you're going to work with a jeweler, like in your environment at least,
yeah,
what are
yeah.
some of the kind of special skills that you need besides just knowing how to facet a stone?
Mm. I mean, you definitely need to know how it's going to go into that piece of jewelry. That's certainly, and that really just comes through doing so many different types of jobs with different types of settings and different shaped jewelry and all those sort of things. So that's definitely one major thing you need to know, if you're, rather than just cutting a stone and finishing it and then letting the jeweler decide how it's going to go into the stone. Quite often I'll get the piece of jewelry itself with no stone in it, and it could be a really weird shape. So I then have to look at that shape and then work out, well, if it's going to be a faceted stone, how am I going to get that odd shape to look really good as a faceted stone? What sort of pattern am I going to add to that stone to make it look good? Am I going to just make it just a simple, stepped cut, or add a few more sort of facets here or there to get a bit more brilliance out of it? So that's probably the most complex thing I've needed to know over the years is that how that stone's going to be set is probably the most important thing, and how it will look in the ring or whatever, a piece of jewelry when it's finished. The other thing would be to know, I suppose, the tolerances, the different tolerances of gemstones, i.e. like heat, how much heat they'll take, or things like directional hardness and all those type of things from a gem cutting point of view, because they can kind of trick you when you're cutting a stone to fit something. If you don't take care of those parameters, you can certainly slip up pretty quickly, and then all of a sudden that stone you're cutting won't fit into that particular stone, or sorry, that setting anymore, and you've got to start again. And as gem cutters, we don't like to start again. We've got a piece of rough, we can't just melt it down. You know what I mean? It's always been a thing with working with gold, and working with gems. Making a mistake on a gem is different to making a mistake on a piece of gold, I think. I hope I'm,
I think so too. I think so too. You can repair gold. You can laser weld it and polish it again, and you can't do
yeah.
that with gems. You one facet too
No.
many is that's it. It's part
One
of the
thing I
game.
get asked, is, okay, so and I've done a lot of repair work. So we repolish a lot of stones, faceted stones that have come out of old rings, make them look good again, take all the chips out. But quite often I get asked if, all right, so if the girdle's got a few chips on it, can you please, Scott, repolish this stone, try and take out the chips if you can, and try not to remove any of the size. So that's always the whole thing. Okay, well, you can't, as gem cutters, you can't do both. You can either do one or the other. So that's always, I always laugh that, I'm always performing miracles on gemstones, but that's part and parcel of what we do sometimes. So
then,
I
okay,
think
so then recutting, then that's another one of the skills then, right? You got to be able to do
yeah,
the recutting if you're doing jewelry work,
yes, definitely,
because
recutting,
repolishing, recutting, repairs.
trimming. Ultimately, the most important thing is to measure. Just keep measuring, because a lot of the little, you know, um, channels and things that all the stones go into, um, measuring is the most important, because the smallest amount of gap is very noticeable. So it really comes down to precision, being consistent in your level of cutting as well, and perhaps the forward knowledge of knowing what you've got from a gem point of view, and how it's going to be put into the jewelry part of it. So, and that's really just experience. It's just trial and error a lot of the time. I've certainly had to start again many a time because I've cut something too small. Either I've lost concentration, or I've just misread the way it was going to be put in there. But you realise the first time you've messed up, you should have done it this way, and then the second time it's usually correct. But hey, anyway, that's how I've learned over the years.
Then hopefully the other stone it'll go into a smaller piece later, or something like
That's it. It usually does.
that. Yeah.
It could do that the next week, or it might be 3 years down the track, and it's like, hey, that's right, I've still got this piece. All right, I can use that today. So it's never wasted, obviously, because one, you're learning about it, and two, it's a stone. If it's big enough to trim down, well, then there you go. That's how you've used it in the end. So
It's sort of funny, like, I don't know where I picked this idea up, but somewhere in my training it was sort of put into me of like, you know, jewelers really like calibrated sizes because they're using stock heads or
Yeah,
whatever. But then
yeah,
when you work with jewelers, you realize the kind of stuff that they give you, it's not calibrated at all. It's crazy, weird shaped,
yeah,
so the strangest stone you ever saw fit into the strangest setting, and you're like, oh man, how can I find how can I replace this or whatever? It's just like,
yeah,
can you make the world's weirdest shape and fit it into this weird setting?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
but
yeah,
not
yeah,
calibrated.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so here's a couple other technical questions I want to ask because I always like to talk to, you know, for us, we're in kind of a funny place. Like we're in the world of professional cutting, but we're so far away from the end customers. We're not by the jewelers, the
Mm,
end customer jewelers. We're not by the end customer, so we never get this kind of opportunity that you're talking
mm,
about, where jewelers send us repair work. This doesn't happen in Bangkok with us at all. So I'm
mm,
always so curious, like when you're in this sort of Western world and you're interacting with either the jeweler or the end customer, for people that are coming from the world of like the competition world and the hobby cutting world where it's all about, meat points, perfect meat points, and like the crazy levels of polishing. Like when you're
mm.
actually working with jewelers and end customers, like are they at all concerned with do they have any expectation at all about meat points or certain types of patterns or anything like that?
Not usually.
Like do
No,
they even know what that means? Like if you were to ask them?
no,
Okay,
no,
so
no,
this
they
is like
don't. And
a
I don't think they ever look at it. Not that I'm worried if they did, because I know that every stone I polish is exactly high level, same thing. That doesn't bother me. But I don't think it for them. All they It seems to me that once they've got the stone back, then all they're thinking about is getting it back into the setting, finishing the job, and passing it on to the customer. I mean, yeah, if it came back with a chip in it or the polish looked a bit dull or something like that, maybe they'd pick it up. But the generally they don't. No, there'd be a few small there'd be a very small level of jewelers who look for that thing, but generally they're really good high end jewelers as well. They have that level of quality control through all of their things, their jewelry, their stones. They look at every single part of it. So yeah, but I don't think I've never heard a jeweler say, "Hey, the meat points aren't right, Scott. Can you go back and join that kite facet up here next to the table?" No, it's never happened.
yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
I always love hearing this because sometimes when I'm cutting, I just feel so paranoid. Like, oh man, there's a tiny little thing, especially if it's on the crown, because people can actually see that.
yeah.
But it always makes me feel good when other older, more seasoned cutters are telling me, like, it's no one sees that stuff but you, basically, or no one's keeping the standards as high as the gem cutters are for themselves, I think.
Oh, definitely. And I even think with some of the repair work I've done, and sometimes the jewelry part of it isn't particularly great. So like instead of having a rectangle cut out for an inlay, it's kind of a skew-if rectangle. So you're you then have to cut a skew-if rectangle to go into that setting, which is supposed to look like a rectangle. And you kind of go, well, I want to cut a rectangle because that's what I do, not it's supposed to be straight and symmetrical. But in the end, the jeweler's happy with what you've done and the customer's happy as well. They don't ever seem to notice those things that happen. Whereas for us, we're like, oh my gosh, it didn't quite meet up in that corner enough. Or, it's because the setting was so bad. I mean, you can only work with what you've got, obviously. But
Yeah.
in the end, I don't know, it doesn't seem to matter. And I always do my very best, no matter what sort of piece of jewelry it is, whether it's, a $30 ring or something hugely expensive. But um, yeah, I don't know. No, it doesn't seem to matter, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it is what it is, I guess. Okay, so here's a question from the audience. This is from Rod Knowles asking, do you find that jewelers who are trained as designers ask for more unusual shapes versus, like their typical retail jewelers?
Yes, I would say quite often the level of designing isn't always practical as well, is from a jewelry making point of view and how it all works together. I mean, um, over here, there's quite a lot of jewelry designers, but they don't always make the piece of jewelry themselves. So they'll give the design to the master jeweler, who then says, well, this part here won't work and this part here won't work. And then when we have to set that stone, how are we going to make sure that stone doesn't fall out, because this design really doesn't make that happen? So um, I would say, I mean, there's some clever designers out there who know about jewelry. That's great, and they're really good. But then there's perhaps, yeah, designers that need to learn a bit more about the whole concept of jewelry making, and also, you know, how it all comes together. I think
Yeah.
that's really important. So it's great to come up with odd shaped stones and things like that, but it still needs to be.
Really, yeah, practical.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and then
Mm,
that's exactly what he was saying. He said there's a couple customers who have had, sort of no training, and they were just trying to make kind of settings that wouldn't fit real stones in
mm,
them. I know one of the things that I have heard of several times here, because we work with different factories here, so I get to talk to some of the factory managers and hear, all kinds of weird stories, because they're working with, big brands in Europe and stuff like that, who are putting in these large calibrated orders, or calibrated
mm,
specifically to whatever they're doing. And
yeah.
he was telling me, they're constantly battling with these designers who, I guess the trend lately has been like everything being really low profile. So
Yeah.
the stone has to be really flat.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
so then they have to sort of kind of combat them and say, like, if we do this, it's going to make a window, just by the physics of it, there's no way we can make the
Mm,
stone that flat. And so then
mm,
they'll do a test cut and say, here's what you asked for, here's what we think it should be. And
mm,
if the test cut is so bad, and the customer will still demand it, they make them sign a waiver saying, you cannot return these, because we're telling you it's not going to
yeah.
look,
Right.
it's not going to be shiny, like the way you
Yeah.
think. It's just going to be
Yeah.
flat. And
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
so
Mm,
sometimes the designer then has to go back and rethink it, or sometimes that they just say whatever, we don't care, which to
yeah.
me, I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow, I can't believe like a big brand wouldn't understand the properties of gemstones. Like, they work with gemstones to make jewelry, but they don't know
Mm,
maybe they don't know anything about the physics of what we know as gem cutters. Like, you need angles, you need proportions,
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
rules, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's right. I mean, I do get jobs that people say the stone has to be this depth because the ring band itself is like, I don't know, let's say 1.8 millimeters, and the stone has to be 1.7, but it's like, you know, like a 5 or 6 mil round or something like that. So I said, well, yeah, I can, but this is what's going to happen. Oh, okay. Oh, no, the customer doesn't like the window, so we're going to make it, you know, 3 mil thick now. So, which is good because at least they understand that part. But some people don't. From what you were just saying before, they just no, that's what they want. And there's this big thing, and all you can see is the hair on the back of your finger when you look through the stone. You know, I mean, hey,
It's amazing. We've even had, I've heard this story from others, but I've also seen it myself. People coming, like I don't know, the person who is the representative from the brand that will come to Thailand to manage the production. And we've had a couple people like that come in through our school here, our cutting school. And we do these sort of special one-off classes when we have groups like this. And I remember one class, and I was showing people window versus no window, and just kind of telling them the basics. What does it mean? And they were just like, wait, which one's the window? I'm not sure. And I'm just like, like, you're the gemstone sourcer for your brand. Like, you can't see
mm,
the difference,
mm,
like, I guess if you only buy commercial stones, you're just used to everything being sort of windowed a little bit, or right on
yeah,
the right on the line, and
yeah, yeah,
you think it's normal, I guess.
yeah, and maybe they're not even looking at that at all. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
if they're just looking for a heap of stones the same color, maybe that's all they're looking at. I don't know.
yeah,
I
like
do
size,
wonder what.
color, check.
Yeah, like for us that matters. I mean, that's, you know, that's the difference between a great looking stone and a stone that's kind of a bit lifeless. So someone hasn't done their job right if they're a gem cutter, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know, they're not bringing out the best of the stone, but it doesn't matter to everyone. But I wish it did, because we'd be more appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's true. I mean, obviously our job is to make it look as best as we can do. So
Mm,
do
mm.
you find that when you have to do, whether it's repairs or replacements for older settings, are the older settings, um, are the stones coming out of them already? Are they windowed stones, or
Yeah.
is there a trend at all that you could identify with older
Oh,
settings?
um, yeah, a lot of the older settings are generally shallower type stones, or really big and deep. You know, it's kind of, none of it's really particularly well balanced. It's either uh, first and second row on the pavilion fairly deep and then flat on the bottom, or just really just all the way down like a boat. So
Okay.
um, perhaps you can, I think some good quality handmade jewelry, quite often the people that have made the jewelry have sourced a really nice stone sometimes, whether it's been cut by a professional or they've taken the time to learn perhaps what a nice stone looks like. You can tell the difference that, one, it's a nice handmade piece of jewelry, and two, they've sourced a really well cut stone to go into that. So that's someone who's got. But most everyday jewelry, um, it can be, yeah, it's just random.
Okay.
Not very often
Just
cut well.
depending on whatever
It's
they
just,
get.
it's, yeah, and I think with colored gemstones, people just want the color. Essentially, that's their ultimate goal, is getting their perfect color. And that, aside from that, if they're not educated in what a good cut stone looks like, and like we were saying, not all jewelers have necessarily know either.
Yeah.
That's probably why it's been like that for so many years. I mean, of late, the cutting has improved so much, but perhaps, going back 70s and 80s type thing, when there was plenty of jewelry still being made and stones being sourced, I think it was more about the color and the size, to be
Yeah,
honest, from
that's
what
kind of what I
I
was wondering. Like, because I think we must hope that the cutting has gotten better, and the cutting. I know for sure that the cutting standard has gotten better since like the 70s and 80s, because people are just
Yeah.
a little bit more aware.
Mm.
In the cutting centers of the world, some of those places have had technology upgrades since the 70s.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
or they're
Yeah.
just getting better at what they're doing, because people are demanding, like, we don't want these weird shapes, or we don't want these
Yeah.
windows. So yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. Just have you seen that? Okay, so we're still talking about the skills of the professional cutter. So we said already, obviously faceting and cabbing, because you need to be able to do whatever. But
Mm.
repairs, repolishing,
Mm.
recutting.
Mm.
Um, is there anything else? I mean, as far as the technical skills go, anything that you do on a regular basis that somebody would need that skill set,
Uh,
other than just communicating well with people?
well, yeah, that's pretty important too, actually. Yeah, but I think, if I think about all the jobs I've done and the things I've done, it's really just it's a mixture of faceting and cabbing, and essentially using both those skills to get yourself from start to finish to
Yeah,
do that job.
yeah,
From a repair point of view, yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and like I said, measuring and making sure all of it's right the whole process along the way, so you don't slip up and make a mistake, because it can happen, or the stone gives way. That happens too. So it's not always my fault, but
yeah,
sometimes the stones don't want to be a stone anymore and they just fall apart. So
yeah.
yeah,
It happens.
but yeah, faceting and cabbing in a mixture of those types of things is what, and knowing what your machines can do from every possible point of view.
Yeah,
Using the edges of a wheel, using the side of a saw blade to cut a little section out of a piece of onyx, or you just kind of become fairly versatile in the machinery you have, trying to adapt a particular shape of stone to fit into something. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of a fun part of it, because you don't always know it's going to work. So you practice with something first, take a bit of a risk, put a few little cuts in and go, oh, that actually work. All right, I'll do that. I'll keep going with that process now and make it work for this job. So,
Yeah.
and then before you know it, you've done 3 or 4 of those different things in a year that are really out of the norm, but you've kept the simple machinery, you've used the simple machinery you've got to its best advantage, I suppose.
Yeah.
And also using, what happens up here, obviously, to put it all together. That's the hardest part, is trying to work it out sometimes, if you haven't done it before, and you look at your machines and you go, oh, how am I going to do that? Anyway, I'll try this. Oh yeah, it works. Good. Excellent.
So what do you think for you? Is it more exciting as a gem cutter? Is it more exciting to have that, that problem from let's say from the jeweler that you have to solve, or is it more satisfying just to have your own rough and cut the best stone from it and not really have to worry about all that sort of measuring and problem solving?
Well, of late, I like just cutting my own things, because there's no pressure and you can take your time. And the only person that has to like it at the end of the day is you, really. So that's kind of nice. But ultimately, that someone else is going to like it. But I suppose there is rewarding things with doing, and not always repairs. Sometimes I've cut many pieces for competition pieces of jewelry as well. So that's probably much more rewarding than maybe some of the small repair jobs, cutting a beautiful shaped piece of, I don't know, jade, mother of pearl and turquoise to go in like a hair piece or something like that.
Yeah.
That's really much more refined type cutting. It has to be precise. It has to be at its highest level. And it's nice to know you can actually sit down and do that and create something that's absolutely amazing without thinking about it like that, I guess, because all I do is think about the process of getting it from start to finish. Then I suppose then you hand those pieces over to the jeweler, who creates the masterpiece in the end and finishes it all off. But if it didn't have those pieces, it wouldn't be what it was. So I guess, yeah, I haven't done a lot of that lately, but I am enjoying just cutting my own rough,
Yeah.
because, a piece of rough, I mean, great piece of rough, it talks to you, you know what I mean? You pick it up from the start and you go, oh man, I just can't wait to start this and finish it. And when you finally take it off the wax or whatever you use at the end, and it actually blows your mind, because it's 10 times better than what you thought it was. I think, I don't know, sometimes it's great to live in your own little world like that for a while.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
that period of time, for 1 or 2 or 3 hours, the whole process of cutting that stone from start to finish, and then looking at it and going, wow, am I the only one excited about this? Well, I probably am at the minute, but that's great. I love it.
No, I
There's no
totally
one.
I totally agree. I mean, for me, especially since COVID and the lockdowns, like I feel like cutting has really been my sanity check. Like every time I'm
Mm,
having a bad moment, I'm just like, okay,
mm,
I'm gonna go cut whatever it is, just find something, meditate on that stone for, like you said, a few hours, just go into your little world. And I
mm,
always get in a better mood from that, like whether the stone goes well or not. Usually if the stone doesn't go well, I don't get in a better mood, but it kind of,
uh,
the process of creation and problem solving and the technical aspects of it all together, it's such a unique experience to have.
mm,
And it's alone, almost always alone. So you're just
yeah,
in your
yeah,
bubble, like you said.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
okay, sorry, go ahead.
so I also, even like back when Laura was working here, and like next to me, we've got the 2 machines side by side. If we were both cutting a piece of rough from start to finish, we'd both be sitting here and looking, and just, we might talk to each other a little bit, but you were both constantly fixated on that one little thing for however long until it was finished. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's a fascination, and it's a lifelong fascination. whether it's something small or something big, but it just, I don't know. Yeah, it takes your, I don't know what the word is, imagination, or it takes you to that place where you want to be sometimes, and knowing what you're kind of in control of the situation, but you still don't know exactly what's going to happen until you finish it. So
Yeah. I know here sometimes when I go into some of the bigger factories that are maybe 12 or 15 cutters in a room, and it's pretty interesting to see because, basically the way that they have them, at least in the factory where I'm going, it's a square room. So they have cutters along all the, like, two or three walls, right? And everyone's facing the wall just with their workstation, and no one is talking. There's like 15 people in the room, and you hear the motors going, but
yeah.
everyone's just so in the zone. And some people have headphones, or some people are just listening to this crazy sound
Mm.
of the room of polishing and cutting,
Yeah,
and grinding and everything else.
yeah.
And but it's just like every you kind of, it's like a temple or something. Like everyone is so focused on what they're doing, and they're all in their own step. Some people are polishing and they're cleaning the lap, or they're focused on the meat points, or they're pre-forming or whatever, and they're just,
Mm.
but they're totally focused on that one, or just dopping. Some people are just dopping, for everybody,
Mhm.
and they're just totally
Yeah, right.
focused on that task. And
Mm.
it's sort of, as someone who does that, when I see that, I'm just like, I have so much respect for you guys. I wish I spoke good Thai, because I really want to know what your experience is like.
Mm. Mm.
Which kind of like makes me want to do this kind of interviews, because I just want to hear it from other people. Like, are we all having the
Mm.
same? And I think
Mm.
we are, whether we're Thai or
We must.
Australian or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I read a book recently. This is probably my favorite gem cutting book I ever found. I think it's called The Life of Gem Cutting. But it's in French. The whole book's in French. So my friend
Mm.
sent it to me as a scan, and I just ran it through. It's like a PDF, like 150-page PDF, and I ran it through Google Translate, French to English, and I read the whole book, and somehow Google Translate did a really good readable
Hmm.
translation. But this
Yeah,
is
okay.
like this is like in Paris in 1910. So it's a gem cutter who wrote sort of his own biography about him
Mm.
and his father was a gem cutter too. And but like the language that he uses to speak about gem cutting, I'm just like, oh man, you are you are speaking my language. I totally understand everything.
Uh,
It's so poetic and beautiful. But
yeah,
he's there, he's in that zone that you're talking about. And it's
yeah,
the same thing that I'm
yeah,
seeing in the factories here. Like,
yeah,
generation after generation, all the gem cutters are just, they're in their own world for sure.
yeah, yeah. I
And
think we're a unique breed, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know a ton of jewelers, but I'm not totally. I mean, I know that the jewelers have their own zone that they go into, but I don't know if it's the same. And since we don't have the same vocabulary with our workflow, it's hard to ask them like, are you
Mm.
feeling this creative high or this super focus, or, I'm sure that they do, but maybe it's not exactly the same because they're working with a different element. They're working with fire. We're working with
Yeah, yeah,
earth and
yeah,
water.
true.
So
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
different thing.
Yep, yep. That's
But
it.
okay,
And
let's.
many other scientific parts of you know how it all
Yeah,
comes together, really, isn't
yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Mm.
I was really amazed to see how jewelers polish metal. It's so easy, for them polishing. Oh, it's
Mm.
just, you just rub it on this thing. I think when they give us, when they give you a stone, say, can you repolish this? They're imagining you're taking it to the buffing wheel like what they do, and it's so easy. And for us, it's like, oh no, this is hard. It's like the hardest
Mm.
part, getting the good
Mm.
polish, no scratches, and still have meat points. If
Yeah,
faceted
yeah,
stone. So
yeah. That's right. Well, and different stones, different way to polish. Uh, if yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, most stones are pretty regular, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, I mean,
there's
yeah,
there's always something that needs to be polished a slightly different way because it won't behave, or yeah, getting around inclusions and things like that. Um, mm,
I think Australia is kind of a funny one because you've got opal, which is a tricky stone. You've got emerald, which has special needs, and then you have sapphire, which is the hardest one of all, as far as color
Mm,
stones go.
mm,
So you've got like these three extremes, all that are your special local stones. I think many people are intimidated by opals. I am because I never had anyone teach me. And many people are
mm.
intimidated by emeralds because they're fragile and can break and can be heat sensitive and you
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah,
and then sapphires are, I think everybody likes sapphires, but they are harder and they take a little bit more time because they're
yeah,
harder.
yeah, definitely.
So let's talk gear a little bit. You're in your studio, so can we see a little bit of what your space looks like and what, because you're talking about the different machines you need to for all these problems. What are you using in
Yep.
your personal space?
So, all right, let's have a look here. Let's have a look. So, it's basically one wall. So, this is my, let's see if I can bring over that. There we go. Here. Oops.
So as we were
That's one.
yeah, we were saying in the
That's my
beginning, the
method.
Australian has their own special machines, and this is one of them, right? So tell us a bit about this.
All right, let's see if I can put this here. Oh, is that going to work? No. Well, all right. This is originally these were made here in Adelaide. These machines by a company called Gemmaster. And they started up. I think it was the very late '60s. They started making machines. I could be wrong, but it was before I was born. So I was born in 1973. So it was before I was born anyway. This is one of their later versions. And when I say later versions, I've had this for probably 15 years, I think. This one's got a three-phase motor on it, and
Okay.
it's been converted to 240 volt. We have 240 volt over here. So it's a good machine for cutting, you know, every day, all day. It just keeps going and going and going, plenty of torque. And it's a great machine for a professional. We've got this one here goes up and down. So, the height adjusting, you
Yeah.
just lock it there. The removable handpiece. So
Yeah.
I've got 3 or 4 of these ready to go at any time, so I can cut, a couple of matching pairs at a time. Obviously your protractor here, which we all got. That's how it works. Once again, it's just unlocked and locked at the back, and you find your angle, and then you just lock it to where you need it, and the mast slides forward and backwards. So it's a fairly simple machine.
And
Not
then
nothing much goes wrong
at
with
the
it.
top, is it fine adjustment up there?
Yes, yeah. There's a micrometer at the top here, so whether you want to wind it fast or slow, but it's a very simple machine, but it does a good job. Yeah,
Yeah.
and not much goes wrong with them, to be honest, apart from occasionally the washers, the nylon washers wear out, but they're easily replaced. And sometimes you just need to pull it apart and give it a grease and clean it up and make sure it's nice and smooth. But
Yeah.
um,
I
yeah,
love the simplicity of the design. I mean, I saw the first time I saw one of these was from Laura, and she's got
yeah,
the same where she's pulling the quill off and being able to look at it like that. It's so cool.
yeah.
But
So
it's like the
that's an older version of the same machine right here. So once again, same. This is probably about 1980 or so. This machine here.
okay.
So, but it's exactly the same principle as this, except when I say this, the machine I just showed you before.
Yeah.
That they've got the only difference is this is a cast alloy base here on the base of the mast that slides backwards and forwards, where the machine I had here, they've used brass, which is much smoother
Okay.
and nice and doesn't. The issue was with alloy on alloy. If you got any dust or grit under it, it's really bad and scratches
Okay.
the bed. Whereas the brass on the alloy doesn't. It's so smooth. So they did make some minor improvements, but essentially the machines are exactly the same in the way they work,
You
just
know,
different motors.
I heard an interesting story this week. I don't know if this is totally true, but somebody in Australia told me this. They were saying, I have one of the old Gem Masters, but it's the first one when they were still called Sapphire. And
Oh wow.
I was like, they were called Sapphire? Because I had this idea, because there's a machine from America from like the 50s called the Sapphire, and it looks exactly the same. And I was always thinking
Okay.
like, oh, they must have just got the same idea and, visually same design. But no, this might not be true. I haven't confirmed this, but what he was saying was the people in America that made the Sapphire machine licensed it to whoever was making it in Australia. And so I guess
Mm,
at first they kept the name Sapphire, but then later they changed it to Gem Master. But
mm,
I think they also had that removable quill, or the handpiece as you
yeah.
called it, in the
Mm,
in one version of the American Sapphire machine, but I've never seen one, so I'm not sure. But
mm,
kind of a cool parallel there with just,
yeah.
this sort of relationship. I don't know if it's the same. It's not the same manufacturer, but the design maybe
Yeah.
is from the same
Well, I wonder.
brain.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if the people that started this had a pattern from somewhere to work with, and
Yeah,
then essentially engineered all the parts
yeah.
here in Adelaide to put it all together. But
So then I
because it
wonder,
would make.
yeah, then I wonder, is the Gem Master better than the American Sapphire? Because if it's the same design but not
Mm,
made by the same people, um,
mm,
hard to say. Hard to say.
yeah,
But kind
it
of cool.
is.
Kind of.
So that's my faceting area itself, obviously, and then down further here, down this side, we have. I wonder if I can just hold it still and.
You got a lot of stuff over there. Oh yeah, that
All
works.
right, this is a saw, so just a fairly simple saw for either taking off small parts. This one here, this is what we call a double-ended grinding unit. It's got a diamond wheel here on. There we go, diamond wheel here, and on the ends, felt buff for polishing opal and silicates like quartz and the things that are fairly soft, like hardness of 7. And
Okay.
then down the very end, this thing here is a dust extractor and a dry sander for opal, and also a dental like handpiece for small carving and things like that. So
Oh,
so
okay.
that's all my machinery basically. It's dust extractor, dry sander, double-ended grinder, saw, and then back to the 2 faceting machines here at the end. So that's my whole wall of machinery that I use.
So yeah,
Um,
it's simple, but you have really a lot of powerful tools right there. Even for us, we don't have what I really want that you have is that the cabbing machine where you've got one side with the rough one and one side with the polishing one.
yeah,
I don't know why
yeah,
we can't find these types of machines. It's basically just a motor with 2 axles, but we can't find them in
yeah,
Thailand.
and
Not like
they're
that.
interchangeable. That's right, because on the end where the felt buff was, you can also put an expandable drum sander on it for, like with silicon carbide belts for larger sanding jobs and things like that. So they're interchangeable, obviously, but I tend to just leave it like that. That's what I use it for. So,
Yeah.
and then on the other side of my room is that's all my rough material here.
Okay.
There's a bookshelf full of slabbed jade on the bottom, and then it goes up to faceting material. And at the very top, there's some of my gem specimens that I like to collect, and a few of my everyday books, like Glenn and Martha Vargas, faceting for amateurs, and a
Yeah.
couple of diagram books. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of my workshop. And then on the other half, we've got gemological equipment, and my wife, who also helps run the business, does photography and all the other things. So yeah, but this is kind of my side. This is the dirty side, and that's the clean side over there.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. No, this is how ours is too. We got my side's over here, and then my wife's stuff is all on behind the screen. So we keep
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to work too close to each other. We need some space. Just
That's it.
every once in a while I'm over here and I just hear a swear and then something gets thrown and I'm like, oh, she cut on the wrong index. So
Right.
it doesn't happen
Uh,
often, but it happens to all of us sometimes.
well, that's it. And I think, if something goes wrong in gem cutting, it can be either it's usually this, or this most of the time. Misindex, stone's fallen off, or the stone's had a crack in it and you didn't see it, or you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, that's generally where there's a few swear words around here too. But anyway.
So I'm curious. As I said, I never had anybody teach me about opals because we don't have opals, at least not where I ever was. And so
Mm,
I've always been a little intimidated by them because I just don't know. I've only heard the rules of opals from non-gem cutters. Like they're not supposed to get hot, or you can't use a
mm,
torch, or you need to keep them in the water, or I don't even know. But tell us a
mm.
little bit, like give us a little crash course for anybody who hasn't cut opals before, because I think I've cut one. I faceted one, but
Okay.
I never did a cab or anything. So
Yeah.
what do you need to know to cut and polish an opal? Like as far as the dopping, the cutting, the polishing, what's a good way to get into it?
Well, from a cutting point of view, I usually cold dot things. It's pretty safe. I was learned originally to use wax, so therefore you have to heat the opal up. Now, if you get opal that's a little bit susceptible to drying out quickly and cracking, heating that sort of opal up isn't a good idea. So cold dopping with araldite, as in epoxy, is a
Okay.
really good way to keep things cool. What we used to do to get them off the araldite is we used to put them in hot water. So instead of like a dry heat, it was just like more, let's say it would raise the temperature of the glue, making it soft, and then you could break the opals off. So um,
How hot
these
is the
days,
water? Like
uh,
warm
not
water.
quite boiling, but back when I was working for Murray, we used to put water in the microwave, heat it up, and then wait for it to cool just a little bit and put the opal in there. I think we never had an issue with cracking opal. The way I do it now is I still use cold dopping for my opal, and I generally just use a very light. I suppose it's one of these. What do you call them? It's got
So
methylated spirits in it,
like a torch
with a little.
or a lamp. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very soft flame. So the trick is to warm up the glue and not the opal,
Right.
because you're really trying to soften the glue to remove the stone. So I guess so. Crash course in opal. One, with opal, you need to know where the color runs. That's the tricky thing with opal, is if it's not a solid piece of opal, like color from top to bottom, it might have just a very thin layer of color, and then there's opal potch underneath. So I guess that'll comes with experience. But for cutting opal, for me, it's probably it's a 3-step process for me. It's obviously the shaping itself, or the gluing onto the sticks with the cold dot, the shaping. Then I use the dry sander, which is a 360 grit sandpaper. And that's what you use to take all the heavy grinding marks out of it and get a really nice soft dome with no sort of ridges in it from and then we go on to using cerium oxide with the felt buff. That's all I need to polish my opal. 1, 2, 3 steps. So
So from the 360 shaping, you can go straight to polishing with cerium. You don't need it
yeah.
in the intermediate steps. Wow.
No, there used to be a 1200. Once upon a time, I learned on a 1200. But if you have you can use a very worn 360, and it's much kinder on the opal, because opal is fairly soft. So if you're using a brand new sheet of 360 sandpaper, it will really cut some heavy ridges into your opal. But so you've got to work out when to use that part of the sanding process, and when to take that piece of sandpaper off and use a worn one to get a much softer, nicer finish. Because these days the cerium oxide is really efficient for polishing out any scratches anyway. But the main thing is to get a nice soft finish. That's the most important thing, and to work out how to look at how all the ridges are being taken out. I think that's one thing when I was cutting opal, was to put on your Optivisor and look to make sure there was no, you come across the top and then it'd get this flat spot where it hadn't been sanded out properly. So if you can do all those processes well, the next process is always a lot easier. It's just like faceting. If you get a good pre-polish, the polishing is always so much easier. So it's no different to opal, but it is soft material. It is heat sensitive, and different opal fields have a probability of cracking and not cracking sometimes as well. There's fields that are known to have cracky opal. There's fields that are known to have really good, healthy opal that doesn't really crack for however many years. So, but I like cutting opal just because of the colour and I don't know. It's fun to cut when it goes well.
Yeah.
You buy a bad parcel of opal and it all cracks in half, and that's trouble. That's why people generally don't like opal. They may have had a bad experience, or but if you know how to handle it, it's great stuff to work with. It's rewarding.
So is there any reason why you've chosen, a sander that's using sandpaper instead of just using a sort of a lapidary wheel like at 360?
Well, because that particular sanding, I could probably just wait a minute, just 2 seconds. All right, here we go. So this is removable from the actual. So that goes on a spindle. You can take this on and off, and on the front is part of the sandpaper. It's quite worn. You can see it's almost got a shine itself on the back of this. So you use a removable adhesive, and you can take this on and off. Oh. And on the back of that is this soft, it's rubber.
Oh. Okay.
Or it's foam. So it has a little give to it rather than being really hard on the back.
You can really push it for your shape and
stuff. That's right. Yeah. And it helps to give that nice sort of dome to the opal as well, rather than being a hard-backed polishing like a type metal or a zinc lap. This has a lot more give to it. So it's great for opal. It doesn't. The purpose of these rubber backing things is you keep the opal moving as well, and therefore it creates a nice even shape and a nice even level of sanding on the top. So, and it spins. I don't know how fast it spins, but it spins pretty quick. So you can't just hold an opal and leave it in the one spot. That'll be disaster usually. So always keep it moving. You don't push too hard, and generally you'll get the result that you need without the opal falling to pieces.
Yeah. And so as far as like health and safety goes, so opal is silica, right? And silica we know is that's the dangerous thing for gem cutters. It's going to give you lung issues. So you said you have a dust extractor. Is that pretty much for opal, like in quartz? Like you really need to make sure everything's either wet or extracted in order to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and if you don't have an extractor, well, then you should be wearing them. I mean, you probably should be wearing a mask with both. It's always, you can never go over the top with that sort of thing. So, but this particular extractor, I've had it's piped straight out to the outdoors outside. So it's always got its full suction. Mm-hmm. When I bought it, it came with a removable bag, but the problem is with the bag that it filled up with dust really quickly and it lost a lot of its suction. And then when you turned the machine on and the bag puffed up, well, all the dust just went into the air anyway. So the people I bought it from said, well, you can actually pipe that straight outside. You'll always get the maximum suction, which I do now. And this the disc sits right in front of the actual like the vent that sucks the dust in. So yeah, it cut the dust by probably 85%
Hmm.
that was floating around my room. I used to, at the end of the week, you'd run your finger over the top and look at how much dust was in the air, and you don't realize how much is in the air until it settles. And you do that, and you go, "Well, that must be. It's obviously going into my lungs." So, yeah, having
Yeah,
that
that's
dust
scary.
extractor, yeah, it's really good. It's very important, obviously,
So
and I
then,
think
well, when you're working
that's
on opals, is it wet or dry? Like when you're cutting them, and
when you're cutting them with a grinder. So that very first round grinding wheel, wet, always wet, yeah. But
okay,
when with the sander, it's dry.
okay,
But the thing is, you just can't. You've got it. Like I said, if you keep it moving, it doesn't get hot. And then generally, you cut at least 10 at once. So you might sand one and then pick up another one and sand another, and then you go back to the first one again and do it again. So that way, you're cycling through the opal and you're never really getting it too hot.
okay.
As is so yeah, all those things you just learn over time, I suppose. And it's also more efficient to cut 10 at a time if you're doing
Yeah.
opals.
Does it
Um,
does it need to be dry, or that's just how you like to do it? Like, do some people?
that's just yeah, that's just how I was taught, because we used to go up to the opal fields. There was a college at the opal fields where they taught opal cutting, and the man up there who was teaching the opal cutting, that's how he taught the opal cutters up there how to cut opal. So, we figured that was a way to do it. I know other people do it differently. Some people use diamond. Some people always do it wet from start to finish. But that's just the method we've used, and it's always been successful. Yeah, you just got to realize that you just have to know what you're working with. I
Right.
suppose that's the most important thing, and what the parameters are for working with opal, when it is going to get too hot and when it's not, and when it's safe just to keep going and finish what you're doing. So,
Yeah.
mm,
I'm curious, like for the old time generation that's doing opal cutting and teaching opal cutting, or were, do they have an idea that like the opal dust is dangerous, or is it kind of just like whatever, keep it wet?
mm,
I mean, because I feel like opal maybe since it's silica, it needs a special emphasis. Like, it's not like you're cutting
mm,
sapphire cabs where if you inhale some
mm,
sapphire dust, it's maybe not that big of a deal. But
mm.
I never thought about it too much until just now. But I'm just wondering if they make a big deal of it, or it's just like whatever.
I think perhaps these days, and there's not as many opal cutters around there these days than there was maybe 70s and 80s and 90s, when the opal industry was really still quite big. It's diminished a lot over the years because of, one, a lot of the opal has been mined, but there are still the serious opal miners and cutters up there. So I don't really know. I think it was kind of every man for themselves, like,
Okay.
really, so to speak. It was just, I don't think it really mattered at the time. The people I've worked for with opal, we've always used masks or extractors and things like that. So I've always worked in a safe environment where it's, you know, um, been. But up on the fields, I really couldn't tell you how they did it,
Yeah.
unless they were taught through a college where you'd have to talk about things like occupational health and safety, working with silica and things like that. But who's to say what they did when they went home? I don't know.
And from the videos I've seen of the ruby mining towns, it seems kind of like the Wild West, just like anything, anything you can make and do and DIY and whatever.
Huh?
It's no
Yeah.
rules. It's a no rules kind of a
Well, that
place.
was my first opinion when I went to Cooper Pedy. It was like the Wild West. I mean, there was people, there's trucks driving around with dynamite on the back and all this sort of thing, and crazy people that are hiding in caravans and all sorts of stuff. Like, it was real, and I didn't realize that there was a place like that until I went to Cooper Pedy. I think I was 18, and it was pretty intimidating at the time because I don't know. There was a lot of crazy people up there hiding from the world, and here, have some dynamite and dig a hole and stuff like that. It was sort of just like, okay, but we just tried to deal with the people we could deal with, and didn't cause too much trouble, obviously. But
Yeah.
it was one of those places. If you cause trouble, you could quite often get a stick of dynamite in the back of your car. That wasn't anything unusual. So yeah.
Do you
Anyway,
do you think it's just like a certain type of rebellious person is attracted to the kind of lifestyle of mining? You know, like because you can sort of be independent and be your own boss and not have to interact with society too much. You think that's how that happens? Because that's
it's definitely
I've heard the same.
it's an
Yeah,
independent way of doing something, isn't it? I mean, who's going to argue with you if you're digging a hole and finding gemstones by yourself? I mean, it's really, if perhaps if you are a person with social issues and things like that, it's a really good thing to be able to do. And I don't know if maybe it does attract a lot of those people that maybe have mental health issues and things like that. It's a place they can go and get away and dig something in and find something rewarding, perhaps, without having to interact with anyone.
yeah,
I, it I wouldn't rule it out at all. It definitely those people are in that area, that's what I've experienced over time. So
yeah.
yeah,
I
and
mean,
there are some good people, of course, but
oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you know, from what I know of American miners, and even just looking at the story of America going west for gold mining and whatever else, you know, like it seems like there was a lot of certain type of anti-social people, not bad people, but
mm,
just people who want
mm,
to do an independent way, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they
yeah,
were a lot of the people, you know, like when I moved first, because I'm from the middle of America, so when I moved to California, I was like, whoa. Even now, like there's a cultural divide, and
yeah,
I felt it. I was like, this, you can feel that this was once the Wild West. Like it still has this rebellious spirit. Um,
yeah,
and it was there. And when you go into the mining, the gemstone community, it's really there because you're like, well, you're like you still are a gold miner. Like, you know, this isn't the 1850s. This is now. You know, you're still there.
yeah,
So, and yeah, there's some characters out there too. So I imagine Australia even more. You're on an island, but even more. You're in the
yeah.
middle of this crazy place.
I
Um,
think it does. It attracts drifters, I suppose. That's the best word I can call them. They drift from one thing to the other, and maybe finding mining is an opportunity to either make it or break it. But for them, it's still just another place to go and hide or get away from whatever they're trying to get away from. I don't. Yeah,
yeah.
it. Yeah,
This
definitely.
this is definitely one of the things on my lifelong list. Like I gotta go up. I want to see this community and just, you know, I've seen videos of the Australian miners and I'm just like, what is it? My wife's been there and I'm just like, what is it? What is it like?
Mm,
It sounds so cool. So yeah, someday,
mm.
hopefully sooner than
Yeah,
later.
yeah. Oh
But
yeah, it's real for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Mm,
why we're still before we get off the topic of gear, I'm always just curious, you know, talking about laps, like do you have
mm.
a giant selection of laps or do you just have a couple staples that you can use for, you know, not talking about opals, but just faceted stones. You know, do you have just a couple staple laps that you use for pretty much everything?
Yep, that's it. That's me. Couple of
Okay.
staples. That's all I need. So I have tried once. It's the only ever time I've tried to change laps is polishing quartz. Quartz can be, really temperamental at
Yeah.
times. So, and for a while I was polishing it with diamond, and then all of a sudden it stopped working. I don't know why, but I had to then go to phenolic, which is like phenolic laps. That it's
Yeah.
like acrylic or perspex or whatever, and that was working. And then that was just, I don't know, that was giving me the shits actually, because it would scratch and then it wouldn't scratch, and then I had to get the perfect mix of polish and water, and if you didn't get that right, you know it was just frustrating. And especially when you're cutting a big piece of quartz, because not many pieces of quartz you get to polish are really small anyway, because quartz you can get it like this big. Well, let's cut it this big anyway. I mean, seriously. And so when I'd get them to repolish, and of course the people that cut them originally cut that much crown and then that much table on it, well, polishing a massive table like that, oh, I don't know. So anyway, I went back to diamond on tight metal, and it started polishing again. So anyway, so I've got basically, for many years I've been using a tight metal lap with either 14 or 50,000. Works fine on just about anything, um, except quartz. But now it's working with quartz, so I don't know. And then of late, and I'm talking in the past 3 months, Anthony Fitzgerald, who's an Aussie cutter over here and also makes laps and all sorts of stuff, sent me a zinc lap, 99% zinc, 1% lead. And he said it's the 1% lead that does something. I don't know. But anyway, I've been using that for the past, not long. I only just changed over and it's great. I love it. And it's really good on Sapphire because it has that much harder base. So, when you've got that much harder base between the diamond and the sapphire, it just, I don't know, it polishes fairly quickly. And I'm going from a 3,000 copper pre-polish onto a 50,000 final polish, and it's excellent. I love it.
Okay.
So
I was just randomly, I was talking to him last week about that exact same thing. I was, because I saw he has these cool dual band laps where you can pull the middle out and change
yeah,
and I saw that and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I messaged him because I was like, I thought you stopped making laps. And he's like, well, people keep asking me to make,
uh,
but we started talking about the zinc lap and I was like, okay, I want a dual zinc, but with like a line so I can do two
okay.
steps in one lap. And so, yeah, I
Oh
think
yeah,
I'm going to try one too. My, I have a mentor here who's a Sri Lankan cutter, and he loves zinc, and he cuts a lot of sapphires as well. And he's just like, zinc, it's great for sapphires. It's
yeah,
harder, but I
yeah.
never tried it yet. So maybe I'll do the same as you with Anthony and get one of his special
Well, I've used
blends.
and I've polished aquamarine on it since as well. That's really nice. So beryl goes really well on it. Garnet, tourmaline. What else? I polished. It wasn't so good on tanzanite. Oh, tanzanite. No, it was all right on tanzanite. There was something else I polished the other day, and it wasn't great. It was something soft. I forgot what it was, but I had to change back to type metal for that. Just that softness of the type metal
Yeah.
wasn't so aggressive on the surface of this soft stone. So, that worked all right. Oh, no, it was a piece of glass. That's right. A piece of pink glass that I had to repolish. I get all sorts of stuff. It was hot pink. It was great. And it was, because it was glass, it was really quite soft. And the 50,000 zinc, it was scratching it. It was just pushing too hard and pulling pieces of glass away. So
Yeah.
anyway, the type metal did the job. So that's pretty my two changeover laps, is just one with a slightly softer base and one with the zinc, which is awesome on sapphire, and your beryls, which are a nice sort of hardness, and your
Yeah.
garnets and your tourmalines. So it's working really well. And I knurl the surface of the laps as well,
Okay.
rather than with a knurling tool that Anthony made for me. So it's great.
Okay. Yeah, he just talked to me about that too. I was like, I never used one. I've seen them. Looks cool, so I'll check it out. The type metal is just a tin blend, right? It's a type of
Yeah,
tin.
tin and lead. Yeah,
Okay.
tin
Oh,
and
tin
lead.
lead.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's a
yeah,
softer.
yeah. It is softer. When it's called type metal because it's what they used to use on printers, on
Yeah.
the printing, same material as that. So
Okay.
it's that
So
just in a big round disc instead.
yeah, I knew about that. I have one that I inherited from something, but I didn't know what the actual metal was. I thought it was. I knew it was tin, but I didn't realize it was tin and lead. So then, if you have a pewter lap, I wonder if there's a difference between pewter and type metal. If it's just the blend. I mean, the ratio.
Hmm.
I don't know.
So what's pewter then? Is that three metals or two?
I
Because
don't know.
that's a
I could be wrong about this, but I thought pewter was
that's an
tin and lead. But
okay.
I'm not an expert of metals. So
No, me neither.
and why
If it
and I
polishes a stone, I like it.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Someone's saying pewter has
Okay.
probably has more lead, which makes
Yeah.
sense. It's really soft.
Yeah.
Um,
True. Yeah.
okay, so then for anybody then who's using like a bat lap, which is like a harder tin, the type metal
Hmm.
must be softer than just a pure tin, or I'm assuming it's or maybe it just feels different in terms of what the lead does. But yeah, I got one
Mm.
too. I got a lead tin lap. I like it. It's softer for emeralds. It's great. I mean, you can use it well on
Yeah.
emeralds.
Yeah.
Um, it's for anyone who's using a bat lap, which a lot of people are, it's like kind of
Yeah.
aggressive. Like it's getting close to zinc.
Okay.
And then you have copper, which is like the hardest, the hardest normal one.
Yeah. Well, he's been using cast iron as well,
Yeah,
which
that's kind
I'm
of
a little bit afraid to use, to be honest. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
part of his dual lap, which I've got one under my bench here, and I haven't used it. And he sent me one, and he said, "You should try this, but I'm afraid to use the cast iron. It just sounds very aggressive."
yeah.
And when you've got your own methods that you know are successful, I
You don't want to wreck them.
think stick to that's it. I know that's right. Yeah.
Well, I know the cutters here are using this really funky lap. It's actually like a diamond cutter's lap. The outside's cast iron, the inside's copper. It's dual metals.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they're using that really hard outer rim for the rough, like the 3000 pre-polish, or they don't use 3000, but they have a 14K on both. But the one that's on the iron, or the cast iron, it's just more aggressive, so it pushes
Yeah.
faster. You can
Yeah.
get your meat points there, and
Yeah.
then they switch to
Yeah.
the copper. So I think for
Yeah.
them the copper must feel soft compared to the
Yeah.
iron. But for
Yeah.
us,
Yeah. A
both of
little
those
more
are
forgiving.
very hard.
Yeah, true, definitely.
Yeah.
One, well, originally I used to, when I first worked for Murray, we used to polish sapphire on copper with 50,000. Yeah, we did. Just sapphire though.
Yeah.
But
I think that's normal. I mean, sapphire's hard, copper's hard, but if you try to do copper on other stuff, I think it will be. I've tried it; it scratches on a lot of stuff.
yeah,
Topaz can
yeah,
do, um, but the funny thing is, in Thailand, they're polishing quartz on copper with diamond powder,
mm,
and I'm just like,
mm,
how does that work? I've
mm.
never gotten it to work, but they do an amazing polish with
Yeah, right.
with copper. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, a
Mm.
question from the audience. Do you have a feeling that the zinc lap is giving you flatter facets than your other, your type metal
Yes.
does?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, yeah. I think one because it's harder and it seems to stay flatter as well. It doesn't seem to wear as much. The
Mhm.
type the tin lead being a lot softer, I think it it's not as forgiving if you miss index, I can tell you that much. It certainly peels off a really good layer of the lap. So you have to be careful with that. But I think just because it's a harder based um, lap, it doesn't tend to dish out so much like over time. Whereas the tin lead, obviously, you're using it and wiping it and using it and wiping it. It's got to be cutting away some of the metal somewhere. Uh,
So then I'm curious, for your tin lead lap, do you have a maintenance routine for reflattening it, or do you occasionally send it back to the lathe to get it flattened
yeah,
again?
I just sent 4 over recently. I wonder if I've got. I was just trying to think if I had an old one there and show you how badly,
Oh, you
you
can
know.
see it. It's that dished.
Oh, not so much that, but where the stones moved in the wax and I've went to put
Oh,
it down on the lap and it's just
it's
like shit, a
puddle.
whole, there's a few of those in it. When it gets that bad, obviously I don't use it, and you can't cover up those ditches in the in the lap. But with the knurling tool, because it doesn't take material off the lap, all it really does is raise it up and then down again. You can, and this is what Anthony said to me, which makes a lot of sense. Once upon a time, we used to use a part of a hacksaw blade, and we'd scrape it all the way around the lap and radially score it like that. But with the knurling tool, like I said, it lifts the metal rather than removes the metal, and
Okay.
therefore it should stay fairly flat as long as you don't take any gouges out of it, of course. But
So then
that's kind of
with the knurling tool, then you just rough the whole thing up, and then you add the diamond powder onto it.
yeah. So this is the knurling tool. It's got 2 ends. There's got very fine little ridges on both ends. One end you use anywhere from 14 to 100,000, and then the other ones is 3 to 8,000. So obviously you don't cross contaminate the polishing / pre-polishing. And you just turn the lap on, spin it slowly, and then hold it nice and flat, put the pressure on from the center, and then just lead it to the outside, and it raises all the, and then I've got one I've just done the other day, which is my tight metal lap. I don't know if it can be seen, but it leaves a really nice, I don't know how much you can see, but there's very fine
It's ribbed.
little, it is, that's it. And that's what it does. So
okay.
Rather than just being, that's a freshly machined one. That's the back of it.
Right.
And Anthony always does both sides. So, and that's the difference between having those little,
Yeah, I never tried this, but I think maybe I'm gonna try it if he sends me a zinc lap, then maybe I'll get that knurling tool as well and try it out. I've seen other people
really
doing
good.
it. It's kind of almost an old-fashioned technique. A lot of people don't, a lot of people don't believe in it anymore, like scratching the lap or knurling it or whatever. And maybe the newer types of laps don't need it because they're more high tech in the blending or something, alloy. But the old fashioned ones, copper laps need scratched and maybe I don't know if the type of metal has to be knurled or scratched, but
it probably doesn't, because they do them just purely machined. But I think sometimes it does depend on how finely they are machined. If there's any micro ridges in the lap itself, it'll come up on your polish. All of a sudden you've got a polish that's got all these little up and down bits. So I think it eliminates any of that as well. It kind of helps to create that really nice flat even polish without any worry of the machining that's been done on the lap. Because I've found sometimes, depending who's machined the lap, it's not always dead flat. There's always these tiny little ridges in it, and you go to put your stone on it and look at it polished, and you go, whoa, I'm just going to have to work that forever until I get rid of those ridges in the lap. And you'll grab a piece of sapphire rough and just hold it on there and smooth it out, and then try it again, and then it's all right. But
I didn't realize Anthony's here. He's watching, so he was just saying, "Oh, the knurling tool's coming." So okay.
Oh, is it? Awesome.
To me, not to you.
Yeah. No, that'd be good. It does a great job.
So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I see we're getting late here. So you were trained by a professional, and now you've trained one or two people. I'm always curious, as a gem cutting teacher, I'm always curious to talk to other people about how they approach teaching. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How you obviously were trained in a studio environment, and I think you also train people in your shop, right? So can you just talk a little bit about how you approach passing on all of that knowledge, and maybe how long it takes?
I think the most important part of it all is understanding how the machine works. What the limits of the machine are, what particular areas of the machine does, and how it works. Because the more they understand how the machine works, the easier it is for them to process the whole start to finish of faceting a stone, I suppose. So I've taught classes in the past, and that was quite a few years ago, but we used to be able to facet a stone after 4 classes, like from start to finish. We'd try and do, and I've always taught to facet the pavilion first, turn it over, and then do the crown second. So I'm trying to think. You might have to ask me a question to help you out. Sorry.
Well, so let's just let's use Laura as the example, because you guys spent like some years together, right? Like she was apprenticing with you for how many years did she work with you?
Maybe 5, I think. Okay. Could have been more than that, actually.
Well, and was she actually in your studio that whole time, or she was working?
Yes. Okay. Yes, mostly, yeah, pretty much, yeah. So she had learned a little bit of faceting before she came to me. So she had a bit of an understanding on kind of how the machine worked, but I think for consistency, you need to do it on a daily basis, especially if you want to, be let's call it a professional cutter and do it for a living. So um, I guess you test people out first to see what they know, what their patience level is like, and what their understanding of faceting is, I suppose, how it all comes together in your mind. And not everybody has that straight away. Some people have that ability to, process those things naturally, and some people need to be coached in a way to work that out. So for me, teaching people, it was more about which person were they? Was that the person that already knew the next step without almost being told, or did that person have to be told every step of the way how to go from here to here to here to here? So once I think I worked that part of it out, you then can adapt to all your different students on how you needed to teach them. Some people you could let go and let them get to a step, and then when they really did get stuck, they'd stop and ask. And that was the people that kind of knew in a way in their mind how they'd get to the next step and the next step. Whereas, so I suppose it's a lot of it is working out their skill level and their level of processing, but also the best thing is to, I suppose, explain how the machine works and what they all do, and let them play around with it first, and kind of let them absorb perhaps some of those things to make progress, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a whole different education about rough selection, and then polishing as well.
Yeah.
When to go from this stage to this stage. Can I polish now? Well, let me have a look. Oh no, there's still marks from the 600 there, and you've finished your pre-polish. Well, no, you've got to go back, and it's all that sort of thing. So it's just following their processes along the way,
Yeah.
educating them when to go to the next step and how to get to that step to start with, I suppose. That's
Have you
I don't know
had
what.
have you had some people that express interest, and then when you kind of gave them that little intro test, you realize like the personality is not right? You know what I mean? Like they're not gonna be able to be a focused gem cutter, or have you not seen that?
Well, when I was working for Murray, we did run classes of maybe 4 or 5 people, and I think from memory, all of them were men. And I think some of them were doing it for the wrong reasons. I think some of them were doing it because they wanted something to do once they retired. They didn't necessarily. Um, they, maybe they thought they knew what they were doing, and they didn't always want to listen to what you had to offer, perhaps, even though you had a reasonable level of experience. And there was, but I would say, there's a small percentage of people that just seem to get it, if you know what I mean. Some people, learn and they get good at it, but there is a small percentage of people that just seem to have it ingrained in their mind how to do it,
Yeah.
and are willing to listen to get better. So yeah, but it's not for everyone, and people do find that out sometimes. You do need a level of patience for sure, and you need to be very independent once you start working by yourself. It's one of those things. So
Yeah.
and not everyone's good at problem solving either. So it's automated a lot of the time. The more you do it.
Yeah. 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 No, it's interesting to see. I feel like for me as a teacher, that my biggest hurdle was trying to figure out how to communicate this kind of thing to people who are adults. Like it's like you're an adult and your student is an adult, and adults aren't used to hearing no, or that's wrong. You know what I mean? Telling an adult that they're doing something wrong, sometimes they
Yeah,
don't like that, or they're not
yeah,
emotionally prepared to get that. It's like, I'm not a kid anymore.
mm,
You can't tell me I'm doing it.
mm.
It's like, no, you're doing it wrong. You gotta, or trying to get, I think the biggest thing is trying to get people to visualize what's going to happen to the facet before it
Yeah,
happens. Like how can you,
true. Yeah,
like if you do this, this is going to get bigger,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you're
yeah,
trying to do this. It
yeah,
takes a few stones, I think, but usually you kind of see it in people's um
yeah,
perceptions.
yeah,
Like suddenly all their meat points are good, and you're like, oh, you
yeah.
got it now, you got it.
Yes, yes, yeah,
So that's
yeah.
always exciting. But Yeah. So then, okay. So, but for your process now, obviously you're a professional working with customer stones and you have work that's happening in your own stuff. So if you have a student
Mm.
now, then is it just giving them higher and higher levels of responsibility or whatever, like more valuable stones as they go along? Or how do you put them through the
Well,
paces?
at this point, this I'm merely just mentoring this person. So he has learnt to cut, and he's doing a really good job. He's very particular about his meat points and all that sort of thing. Like for him, that's super important, and I mean, it is important, but for him, it's ultra high level.
Okay.
So at this point, he's come to me with his faceted stones. What he's trying to do, he's trying to start his own business, gem cutting, and he will, because it's what he wants to do. And he's one of, he's one of us basically. He's the next generation again, who just wants to do this for a living, and is doing whatever he can. So, but what he learned just by coming to me already for a couple of times was mixing your own diamond paste. And he'd been using water and diamond paste together, which I said, well, you don't actually have to do that. And then I said, well, I mix my own diamond paste. You do your powder and your agents to mix it with that. And then and he didn't realize, and he had a couple of issues with his machine. It wasn't lined up properly, and the table was getting cut on an angle, and we fixed those issues. So um, the next step for him, because I do it for a living, he's trying to make that transition, obviously, from cutting and finishing his own stones into then being able to sell them and making a living out of it. So that's why they've approached me, these people, because they want this boy Mitchell to hopefully start his own business. Because so at this point, we're just kind of mentoring him in ways through how I cut my stones to be, how, the question he asked me, oh, how long does it take for you to cut a stone, basically? And when I said, well, let's say if it's like I don't know, a 6 mil round sapphire, maybe an hour and 15 minutes or something like that. So, and he just went, oh, wow, really? I mean, yeah, but I've been doing this for a long time, and I've refined my methods, and I've worked out, from this step to this step to this step, I can go from start to finish. So he's working at a gem club where they're doing 6 steps to get from, grinding to polishing, and he only gets to do an hour a week and that sort of thing. So so that's where I'm mentoring at this point in time, is him transitioning from being a hobbyist to try and sell his stones as a living, and also getting him up to speed as a, let's call it he's not at professional level yet, but certainly he wants to be more of a commercial type speed, but
Yeah.
still have a very high level product of meat points and good, you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
everything else that
Yeah.
you'd
Yeah.
expect in a highly cut stone. So he's not here with me working every day, but he certainly wants information from me, which I'm more than happy to help him out, because he really wants to do this, and that's where I'm at. So
No,
mm,
it's really cool.
mm,
It's really inspiring to meet and talk to other cutters who are, willing to take the time, because so many people don't want to do that. Like even
mm,
I've asked people who I've met, like people that are way above me, like, can I mentor under you? And they're just like, no. Either like I'm too
mm,
busy, don't have the space, don't have the time,
mm,
or I
mm.
just don't want to do that. Some people are not good teachers either, so they shouldn't
Yeah, yeah.
do that. But
True.
I think it's awesome to, when I met Laura and she was like, oh yeah, I learned from Scott, and Scott learned from, his master
Mm,
teacher guy, and it's like,
mm,
wow, okay, you guys are really like
mm.
the old style apprenticeships, like you're spending years learning how to do it in a professional environment. It's
Yeah.
hard to find that now. Hard to find someone that will even
Mm.
do that.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing was, we're all left-handers as well. So my boss was a left-hander. I'm left-handed. Laura's left-handed. So
That's
it was
crazy.
kind of strange that we're all lefties. And I think you're a left-hander, aren't
Yeah, and
you?
my wife is too.
Oh, what? So yeah, there you go. I don't know. I don't know how that works out, but
I don't know.
hey.
I always had a theory that there's more left-handed gem cutters, but every time I do an online poll every once in a while, and it's always not true. But No, it's something weird in Thailand as well. I don't know if this is the same for you, but as a left-handed person, I always notice when other people are left-handed. And in Thailand, there are just an overwhelming amount of left-handed people. Like every restaurant server is left-handed somehow, and I'm like,
Mm,
how has this happened? Like, is it
mm,
I mean,
mm.
it's genetic, but is there like a overwhelming genetics for left-handed people in Thailand, or they? I don't know. In America, there was something in the past where they were repressing left-handed people. Like my mom had that. They tried to make her
Mm.
right-handed, and it didn't
Yeah,
work. But
yeah, yeah.
maybe that could be as well. Like they didn't do that here. I don't know, but
Mm,
uh,
mm,
yeah. So Laura had commented in the chat. She said one of the best things that she learned from working with you for that time was some of the polishing methods and like the tips and tricks and stuff that you maybe wouldn't
mm.
learn so easily from a book. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
not just how to cut a stone, but actually like the whole trade around it,
Mm,
and the whole thing. I think that's true too. It's hard to. I mean, there's some stuff that's so like doping, wax doping. Trying to learn that from a book, impossible. I think
yeah,
that would be
yeah,
so.
true.
Even learning that from a teacher is hard. It's hard to do.
Mm,
It's a subtle
yeah.
technique, and
Well, it is, isn't it? Because it's also you're working with something that gets hot, and your mind's telling you don't touch that. That's hot, but you have to because. And sometimes getting the perfect heat's almost on the edge of a bit too hot. But
yeah, and
you
then it
know,
starts dripping and melting, and then you
yeah,
are
yeah,
throwing wax everywhere. Every time I
uh,
prep students for doping, I'm like, okay, look, your instinct is going to be to do this, and I don't want you to do that because you're going to throw hot wax everywhere, and it's going to be on me. So I'll show you. Then just stay calm. If you burn yourself, it's
yeah,
okay. Stay calm. And yeah, doping is fun.
yes,
It's a
yeah,
fun,
it is.
it's a thing. Okay.
But it's effective, that's for sure.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, it's an effective way of transferring and continuing on cutting a stone from start to finish, isn't it?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I really, it took me a long time to learn wax stopping because I had to meet somebody before I learned it. Like I tried it, never could figure it out on my own. And it's not until I moved here really and someone showed me in person, like, this is how you do it.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, now I love it. It's easy and it's
mm,
fast.
yeah,
I use glue as well, but
yeah,
for one side, I always use wax because it's like the first step is easier in wax. Putting the preform
yeah,
into wax is easier than putting it into glue. I mean, you're doing pavilion first, so it's table to dop's pretty easy, but I'm doing crown
yeah,
first, so the
yeah.
preform's
Okay,
going into the wax. It makes more sense.
yeah,
So,
true. Yeah, you've got a little bit more holding power with the depth of the. Yeah, so I use three types of glues. I use super glue on the flats,
mhm.
and then yeah, and then either cold dopping depending on what I'm doing, or wax for sapphire. Definitely, yeah, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Mm,
Okay, so
mm.
we had one question from the audience. This is from Dean Baker. He's asking, do you ever use resin bonded laps or do you know about resin bonded laps? Like
Um,
the ones that have the embedded grit, like um,
this is talking for just grinding, like
or in
as
polishing.
in.
I think more about
Okay,
polishing, like ones that already
I've
have
probably
the
never
diamond
used them.
inside.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've used sintered laps obviously for grinding, but I don't know about the resin ones as far as like pre-polish and polish. Do you mean
Yeah.
like they can go up to a certain grade,
Yeah.
like 50,000 as well, and you use them like that?
Yeah.
I've
Well,
never used them. No.
I know I bought one from Australia. It's not Australian, but I just happened to buy from there. The Lightning Lap. Those ones have their diamond inside of what feels like, I guess it's resin. It feels like plastic or something, or like the Hyper
Hmm.
Inch laps. People in America use those. I don't know if I guess in
And so
Australia.
you just use water with them
Yeah, yeah.
when to. Do they wear out quickly? Like, do you have to, like a sintered lap? Do you have to reface them?
I don't know. I don't really use them that much. The only one,
No.
I only have one for emeralds, and that's it, just so I don't have to use
Yeah,
oil. But I'm
right.
not the best person to ask that, but other people maybe will know.
Uh,
But I guess one
mm,
other thing I wanted to ask you about gear, because you're in Australia, I mean, so many people are in America or Europe, so buying American laps, it's not a big deal. But buying, I think, to Australia, the shipping is extremely high. So are you
Mm,
guys then really trying to buy Australian laps? And I mean, aside from the machines, of course, but the laps
mm.
specifically, are you usually trying to get Australian laps, or do you just get them because it's convenient?
I do, but because I've only really ever used two different types of laps, I haven't had to try and access other laps before because the ones I'm using don't cause me any problems.
Okay.
So I suppose if they get the result I need, give a really good polish, which I'm very happy with, then I don't feel the need to change anything about what I do with my polishing and those sorts of things. I mean, if somebody gave me a couple of different types of laps to try, maybe I'd try them. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's limited to what we can get in Australia from Australian made. But I mean, Anthony does and was making, good quality cutting laps. And there are people that still make good quality cutting laps here because there is a good gem cutting community to supply here. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but I haven't had enough experience in buying laps from overseas. I don't use a lot of different laps, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah. So
Mm.
you can just get, uh, I mean, where do you, if you were going to replace one of your type metal laps, do you just get it from one of the local machine manufacturers, like fastening machine manufacturers?
Yeah, you can get them online. I mean, I've usually got I've got a collection anyway from over the years. I've probably got 8 type metal laps just sitting here, and I get a couple of months ago, I sent off 4 to Anthony to be refaced, and they'll last me a while. But now that I'm using the zinc lap as well, I'm really not using the type metal lap much at the minute. So I've got more than enough to resupply as I get them, you know, as they become out of action. I've got another one to replace it if I need it. But you can buy them locally, yeah,
Okay.
or online, and they are Australian. They are from Australian suppliers. So
That's cool.
yeah, yeah.
That's really
So you
cool.
can usually get what you need, but
Yeah.
it all depends on your method of polishing, I suppose. If you found a lap that you've bought overseas and you can only get it from overseas, um, whereas
Yeah.
for me, being a commercial gem cutter, you can't afford to stop for too long because if you're just doing it for a hobby, you can wait a month to get your lap sent over from overseas. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
not an issue, but I need problems fixed straight away. So
Yeah.
hence I've got 4 laps sitting there.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious. I know we're beyond the time that I thought we were going to take, but I still have more questions. Um,
Okay, I'm still awake. It's all right.
do you do you have a? I mean, I'm always curious about what it's like in other countries because here we have a couple lapidary shops where I can just go out. If I run out of diamond powder or acetone or whatever I need, I can go in
Yeah,
10 minutes and get it again.
yeah,
Do you have
yeah.
that as well, or do you have to order everything in
We used
advance?
to. We used to. We used to have one in Adelaide. So Gem Master used to be made in Adelaide, and they also had a shop where you could get your supplies, your polishing powders, and all that sort of thing. Now it has to be all ordered online.
Okay.
It does come from interstate, so it can usually get here the next day, but I generally make sure I'm overstocked with everything and then order in advance before I run out. So
Okay.
um, my only issue is now if something goes wrong with my machine, it has to be sent interstate. I can't take it down to the people that used to make it, which used to be about 30 minutes drive.
Yeah.
And then, they'd fix it within a couple of days and then I'd get it back again. So that's my only problem now. It has to be sent interstate. And I don't know how long that would take, but I've got 2 machines. So
Right.
that's a blessing.
You got a
Yes. Yeah.
backup. So who?
Yeah.
So Gym Master's out of business now, right? So who's going to be the repair person now? The people that took over the
Oh,
people.
so they got bought out by a company called Gemcuts.
Right.
So they're still being made here in Australia, the Gem Master machine, but they're owned by a different company that are making them. So yeah, they're still being made here,
Okay.
but they're in New South Wales, so they're on the east coast of Australia. So
Okay. So totally.
sending something there could take a few days. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and I
Interesting.
don't know how long it would take for them to repair it. I have no idea.
Yeah, because I mean, they're they're not the same people that have been making them all these years, so maybe they are figuring it out.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess I'll find out when I have to. But um, I mean, Anthony has been repairing Gem Masters for a while too. So not that he's had to repair mine, but I know his experience is,
Okay.
fairly extensive on repairing. So yeah.
So that's another resource. Yeah, you guys have some good resources in Australia, considering,
Yeah,
you're.
true.
I guess you have to.
Yeah,
You're sort of more remote than maybe other people, so you need to have all that infrastructure there, so you don't have to rely
yeah,
on foreign stuff.
yeah,
It's kind of cool.
yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, even though I've been doing this a long time, there's still not many of those people out there that can do it. It's very limited, and they're very, they're specialized machines. So you need to at least know how the machine works in
Yeah.
some way to be able to fix it. Mm.
Yeah, I think if my machine broke here in Thailand, I don't think I could deal with that, with the language barrier and everything. Just getting the laps
Mm.
reflattened is it's a gamble.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, but I don't know if they're gonna be flat or they're gonna be,
Yeah, yeah,
I've not had a bad experience flattening them, but they're not always aligning the lap to the hole. They're just putting it in back to, you know what I mean? Uh,
yep,
and so if it's not aligned with the hole, then it's gonna have a wobble, and
yeah.
it's like hit and miss. Sometimes they get it perfectly right, and sometimes maybe the hole wasn't straight or something, and then it's like, oh
Mm,
man,
mm.
okay, it kind of got worse. Actually, it's flat, but it's
Yes.
wobbly, so it's not really gonna work. Okay, so
Mm.
okay, well, I'm gonna let you go because we've been on here for like almost, I think, 2.5 hours now, which is amazing. So thank you so much for your
That's all
time,
right. That's
and
okay. Pleasure.
I'm glad that we were able to, get together on Australian time, not too late this time for, normally we're a couple of hours later than this. So kind of nice for me
Mm.
too. It's like not midnight for me right now. Usually it is. So it's
Yeah,
awesome.
right, great. All
So,
right. Well,
okay,
thanks
well,
everyone. Thanks for listening.
if people want to find you,
Yeah,
you've got Instagram, you've got Facebook, and you have your website. So people can find you online if they want to follow you on Instagram. You're pretty much posting stones somewhat regularly, right? If people want to see your work.
yeah, yeah, reasonably regular. Yeah, of course, definitely. I mean, my wife does a lot of that, so
Okay.
but yeah, we're very regular with it because we're always cutting new stones. So we love to show them off, and quite often I'll put up, a picture of some rough that I'm about to cut, or yeah, interesting stuff if I can, for sure. Yeah,
Excellent. So we will hopefully push all of the people onto your social media and they can come buy some stones or at least admire them. And maybe if there's some Australian cutters or hopefuls out there, then they can find you and
yeah.
at least ask some cool questions or just watch this talk and learn some stuff about the local community as well.
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to people about if they need to know something, or they want to be educated in some way. It's great. I like to delve into my brain and talk to people about it. It's what we do. So
Okay, Scott. Well, I want to thank you again for your time, and thanks to the audience for another awesome couple of hours of picking the brain of a cutter from somewhere in the world. So today it was Australia. So it's so cool.
great.
Well, I hope to get to hang out with you in person one day once the
Yeah,
pandemic's over and maybe if when Australia is open and Thailand is open and we can move again. I definitely
yeah, I
want to
know.
come say hi and
Yeah, for sure.
we
Yeah,
can say hi in person.
that'd be great.
Okay, well, happy cutting and have a good night and rest of the week and everything. And I'll catch you later.
Thanks very much, Justin. It's been
Okay,
great to talk.
see you
Thank you,
later.
everyone. Okay, bye.
Bye bye.